This diagram maps out a breakdown in military logic. On one side, you have a small drone that costs about $50,000. On the other side, you have two defense missiles priced at $3 million apiece. By spending $6 million to shoot down a $50,000 target, the defending force is losing the economic war in order to win a single tactical exchange. That 120-to-1 loss ratio is the primary goal of the attacker. Adversaries use these cheap, off-the-shelf drones to swarm heavily protected targets, forcing the opponent to fire their most expensive interceptor missiles. This strategy focuses on draining financial reserves rather than destroying equipment. Most modern defense programs are built for the opposite of this reality. The United States military-industrial complex prioritizes hyper-expensive conventional platforms like the F-35 stealth fighter. These systems require massive, continuous funding and specialized infrastructure, creating a top-heavy structure that is difficult to pivot. The Gerald R. Ford-class aircraft carriers are a prime example. They cost billions of dollars to build and millions more to operate each month. When faced with a swarm of small, unguided munitions, these massive vessels become financial liabilities, needing even more expensive defense layers just to remain operational in a contested zone. When the math of war becomes this unbalanced, a superpower faces a new kind of vulnerability. The danger is no longer just being outgunned on the battlefield, but being bankrupted by the sheer cost of its own weapons deployment. In 2002, the Pentagon ran a simulation called the Millennium Challenge to test how a high-tech naval fleet would fare against a smaller, unconventional adversary. The results were unexpected. The opposing commander, using basic equipment and creative tactics, sank the entire American fleet involved in just 17 minutes. He achieved this by bypassing electronic networks entirely. He sent orders via motorcycle messengers to avoid signal detection and deployed a dense swarm of hundreds of small speedboats to overwhelm the carrier group's sophisticated defense systems. Those simulation results have since become a real-world blueprint for regional powers. Nations like Iran have spent the last 2 decades building an entire naval strategy around these fast attack craft, recognizing that volume and speed can beat high-tech precision. These forces are purpose-built to close geographic choke points like the Strait of Hormuz. In these narrow waterways, a conventional navy loses the advantage of distance, finding it nearly impossible to safely clear a path through thousands of small, expendable threats. Controlling a global trade artery with low-cost tactics effectively nullifies the influence of a multi-billion-dollar navy. The result is a transfer of geopolitical power away from the established fleet and toward the force that can shut down the route for pennies on the dollar. Reopening a trade route doesn't immediately solve the crisis. If a choke point is closed long enough to back up over 1,000 cargo ships, the system faces a massive lag. It can take 6 weeks to 3 months for that trapped oil to actually reach the global market. This delay triggers a rapid secondary crisis. As crude oil shipments stall, refineries run low on supply, leading to localized and eventually national shortages of processed diesel fuel and gasoline.
A diesel shortage moves directly into the agricultural sector. Without affordable fuel to run machinery and without the petroleum inputs required for fertilizer, planting stops and yields drop. The end result is a sharp increase in the price of food across the globe. This chain of events threatens the petrodollar. For decades, Gulf nations have sold their oil in dollars and invested surplus profits into U.S. Treasury debt. In return, the United States has provided the military security required to keep those trade routes open. If the U.S. military is paralyzed by asymmetric threats and can no longer guarantee the safety of those routes, the trade-off stops working. If the security blanket fails, Gulf nations have little incentive to keep buying U.S. debt, putting the financial stability of the dollar at risk. The U.S. government is currently navigating a mathematical trap. With national debt reaching $39 trillion and the petrodollar system under pressure, the traditional ways of funding the state are reaching their limits. Facing these obligations, the federal government has a narrow set of options. While massive tax increases or extreme austerity are possible, they are politically radioactive. Historically, governments in this position often choose to inflate the currency, printing more money to pay off their debts, even though it dilutes the dollar's value towards zero. This pattern of currency debasement is visible in the fall of the Roman Empire around 400 AD. As their military and administrative costs grew beyond their means, they began to systematically devalue their own currency to fund the state. In the year 200, a Roman coin was 85% silver. By the year 285, that silver content had been cut to just 5%. The empire was quietly defrauding its citizens to pay for an expanding military machine it could no longer truly afford. History suggests that hyperinflation is a recurring outcome for empires that expand their military and administrative reach beyond their actual financial capacity to maintain them. We're seeing a shift in economic power that echoes the transitions of the last millennium. The current breakdown acts as a correction for a system that has grown beyond its sustainable limits, forcing a change in how we manage and value money. When a fiat currency loses its utility and the cost of goods outpaces the supply of money, society tends to seek out more stable alternatives. This often leads back to what is called honest money, assets with intrinsic value that cannot be devalued by government printing. An economy built on honest money naturally imposes limits. Because a government can no longer print its way out of a deficit, it is forced to shrink. It can no longer fund expansive bureaucracies or long-term conflicts that it hasn't directly taxed its citizens for. The current economic climate requires a shift in personal responsibility. If the government cannot maintain its own financial health, it cannot bail out its citizens. Taking responsibility for your own financial liberty means recognizing that the system that caused the problem is not equipped to solve it. The dismantling of a debt-reliant military-industrial complex clears the way for a more stable, financially honest future. It marks the transition from a system of constant expansion to one based on tangible value and fiscal reality.